immerse yourself in there a really long time, 3 quarters or 10 weeks, and you really get to know the other folks in the environment. You, in the interim, have been working in PTSD psychotherapies for quite a while now, so you're the psychologist in the group. And you started with narrative. Let's tell a story. I remember when we first started to look at developing. And now you've moved to evidence-based assessment so that you develop trust. Can you tell us how serious play is, how you're working with serious play so that you make it safe enough to conduct real classes in there and then potentially real psychotherapies in there?
Sure. So I actually originally started working in kind of virtual reality environments for exposure therapy for anxiety disorders, particularly PTSD, and working with service members, particularly in the Army. And this group was a group who was already kind of technologically proficient, and they found it was really attractive to them. So it wasn't too much convincing on the patient or the client side. There was a lot of work that needed to be done in trying to convince other colleagues, other professionals to refer to us to do that work. And so there seems to be a lot of skepticism around just the idea that a game can be useful, other than just a time killer and a time waster or something for entertainment. And so there are really 2 things that we had to do. One of them is we had to collect data. And of course that was why we were doing the study anyway. But we wanted to find some data to suggest that what we were doing was worthwhile. So we wanted to see that these interventions were useful. We wanted to see that they were at least as useful as what we were doing otherwise. So we're collecting all sorts of outcome data and psychotherapy outcome data. Are their symptoms better? Is their life better? That kind of thing. Also physiological data. But then we also really had to work on the front of testimonial, if you will. People are not necessarily only convinced by data. They also need that emotional experience as well. Early on in that process, I attended, just because I needed to continue education credits, I attended a day-long workshop on ethics around using technology in psychotherapy. It was put on by the American Psychological Association. So I went to this day-long workshop. And they went through a number of things, Yelp and Facebook and LinkedIn and whether it's ethical use in certain ways in therapy. And what was funny is I was there with a colleague who was working with me in Psychomod. We were building a lot of environments in Psychomod for educating patients and clients. And these 2 women behind us were kind of talking back and forth, and my colleague and I could hear them. And the presenter eventually got to the point where he said, and if you can believe it, some people are doing therapy. And my colleague and I kind of smirked at each other, because we're looking at that. And these 2 ladies behind us, one said, and I hope she's not, I don't think she's here. One said to the other, well, that's the second line. And the other one said, oh, it's this horrible place where people fantasize and change their clothes. And that was her description. And of course, if that's your understanding of what these spaces are, these platforms are, then you're going to have a very different experience and whether this is an acceptable or safe place for you. But other experiences that I've had, we're watching somebody come from having that skepticism, that healthy skepticism, but having an open mind to experience and data and seeing people transform to the other side. Our executive director at the Center for Deployment Psychology, Dave Briggs, when I first joined the agency office, wherever, I told him I was interested in moving us in that direction and expanding how we disseminate best practices. Instead of just doing face-to-face workshops, maybe we can offer some of these things in experiential online environments. And so it'll never work. It'll never work. There's just something about being face-to-face that makes all this work. And I do think that there are some advantages and disadvantages to either of these models. But he was open-minded enough to let us try it. And so as we've been doing this now since 2014, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. I wish I could go to all of your presentations, but I'm going to be talking at the same time too. But what's funny now is, the first time we asked him to present in that space, he was not real excited about it. He came to me after the first hour when we were taking a break. He ran down the hall to my office and said, "This is going to kill me," because it was really difficult. You have to manage different things when you're teaching online than if you're teaching face-to-face. By the end of the first day, he said, "I think I can see us doing more of this." And by the end of the second day, he was advocating we do way more of this than we were already doing. And so I think all of the panels so far have talked about that experience is important. It's people will start at different places. Some will really jump right in and be very accepting early on. I think probably everybody in this room falls into that category, right? We're early adopters. There are going to be some that are skeptical and have an open mind. And there are going to be some that are just, they feel like these platforms are just horrible places where you fantasize and change your books. But by being in these environments, by having an experience, seeing the data that supports that this really can be useful, and then having a personal experience where they can, they see the change either in themselves or in others that work in that narrative, that testimonial can be a place for this to happen and support this too.
This is a question I
Or you couldn't build anything too big to crash your computer with too much photorealism. I think I was surprised by Minecraft's success. Even though I predicted it didn't do that at the time, before it launched, that it's going to be a kids' virtual world that succeeds, not one for adults, and I've seen Minecraft, but I cannot imagine something so low res would do it. But since kids bought into it, and since they all had hardware that could run it, versus very few middle school kids had hardware that could run Second Life back in 2008, Minecraft was able to take off as the dominant virtual world. And the fidelity mattered to them. I think having consistent fidelity in both motion and graphical realism is perhaps the more important thing. When you have, we built a very high-res theater, and then when we put in our avatars that we built up, and this was, through the Unity engine, but the students that were doing the avatars couldn't get them to match the fidelity of the theater. We just pulled them out. We said it's better off without an audience than to have audience members that don't look like they match there. So I think that consistency, again, coming back to the Uncanny Valley, which hasn't been fully studied in the VR space. It's been a lot of looking at do your eyes match the face in terms of their realism, but looking at motion and or presence in this 3D space and or your own body, how much, as long as that degree of realism matches up, I think people will mind it.
I think that I know Microsoft's in the room. One of the smartest decisions they made was buying Minecraft, not because of fidelity, because they produced some beautiful fidelity in the games they produced in the earlier years, but it's the Disney effect. They bought the next generation of computer scientists because you can really program these environments. Garth, I was going to ask you about the challenges and the blockages for innovation in government, and you pushed back at me and said, let me tell you about the innovation that's going on in government instead about the blockage. let's have that conversation up here.
I go back to where you...
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Because, so your first question